The Clone Wars. Millions of soldiers born to die, thousands of Jedi sent to lead them, and only one Sith Lord pulling every string from the shadows. 3 years that consumed 1,000 generations of Republic legacy and erased 1,000 years of Jedi history. 3 years that turned a democracy into an empire, brothers turning on brothers and heroes falling into darkness. This is the story of the most successful lie the Sith ever told. The planet was Geonosis. The year was 22 BBY. The Republic had existed for 25,000 years without a standing military. The Jedi were the closest thing to soldiers the Republic had, and there were only a few thousand of them, scattered across a galaxy of billions. The Senate spent its time arguing about trade routes and taxation. It wasn't a perfect system. The Outer Rim was neglected, corruption was setting in, whole star systems were starting to feel like the Republic had forgotten they existed, but nobody was at war. That was about to change very quickly. The chain of events that leads to Geonosis starts with Obi-Wan Kenobi following an assassination trail. Someone had tried to kill Senator Padme Amidala, former Queen of Naboo, and one of the loudest voices against militarizing the Republic. The trail brought Obi-Wan to Kamino, a water world that had been completely erased from the Jedi archives, which is already deeply weird, where he found a clone army. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, all grown from the same genetic template, all trained, all ready to deploy. The Kaminoans told him a Jedi Master named Sifo Dyas had commissioned the army years ago on behalf of the Republic. He foresaw a massive galactic conflict coming, a war that would tear the Republic apart, and he told the Council the Republic needed an army to survive it. They removed him from the Council for being too extreme. He went ahead anyway, secretly commissioning the clones on Kamino around 32 BBY, telling the Kaminoans it was an official Republic order. Shortly after the deal was made, his shuttle was shot down over the moon of Obadiah. The people who shot it down were the Pike Syndicate, a criminal organization, and they had been paid by Count Dooku. Dooku then stepped in, assumed Sifo Dyas' identity with the Kaminoans to keep the project running, brought in bounty hunter Jango Fett as the genetic template for every clone, and made sure each soldier was implanted with a behavioral modification chip. The official explanation for the chips was that they prevented clone troopers from being turned against the Republic by rogue Jedi. That explanation is technically true in the narrowest possible sense. So what Obi-Wan found on Kamino was an army that started as one desperate Jedi's attempt to protect the galaxy, got hijacked by the Sith after his death, and had been sitting there for a decade, waiting for the right moment to be used. He followed Jango Fett from Kamino to Geonosis, got close enough to eavesdrop on a meeting between Count Dooku and the full leadership of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the Separatists, thousands of systems that had decided they were done with the Republic, and got caught. Before they took him, he managed to fire off one transmission to Anakin, which got relayed up to the Jedi Council and the Senate. The message confirmed two things. First, the Separatists had a massive droid army, already assembled and ready to go. Second, the man leading the Confederacy was Count Dooku, former Jedi Master, student of Yoda himself, one of the most respected figures the Order had ever produced. His Sith name was Darth Tyrannus. Anakin and Padme went to Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan. Both got captured, so now you had three of the most important people in the Republic, a Jedi Knight, his Padawan, and a sitting senator, chained to posts in a Geonosian execution arena. 212 Jedi dropped into that arena simultaneously, igniting their lightsabers in the stands and jumping down into the sand. Jedi are extraordinary fighters. Every single one of them is a dangerous individual. But they had never trained as soldiers, had never coordinated large-scale combat, and had no cover in an open arena against an enemy that doesn't get tired and doesn't run out of bodies. By the time Yoda arrived with the clone army, roughly 31 Jedi were left standing out of the 212 who had gone in, around 170 dead in one afternoon. The worst loss the Order had suffered in centuries, and the Clone Wars hadn't even officially started yet. The clones changed things. Yoda led the relief force in. The droid army had been dismantling Jedi one by one. Now they had a real fight. The Republic pushed back. The battle for Geonosis became a full-scale planetary campaign, and eventually the Republic won it. But the Separatist leadership escaped, and before he left Geonosis, he was handed the plans for a planet-destroying superweapon, what would eventually become the Death Star. He brought those plans directly to Darth Sidious on Coruscant, so before a single official declaration of war had been made, the Sith already had the blueprints for the weapon that would define the next 2 decades of galactic history. Back on Coruscant, the Senate moved fast. Representative Jar Jar Binks, standing in for Padme while she was off getting captured on Geonosis, proposed granting Palpatine emergency powers. The motion passed. Palpatine now had the authority to bypass the Military Creation Act and formally activate the Clone Army as the Grand Army of the Republic. He accepted these powers reluctantly, promised to return them once the crisis was resolved, and never did. Over the course of the war, he kept stacking more on top. Palpatine got his army, he got his emergency powers, and somewhere across Coruscant, in a meeting nobody would ever know about, Darth Sidious, the man who had engineered every single piece of what had just happened, received a report that everything had gone exactly as planned. So, 7 weeks after Geonosis, or roughly that window, and the war is already everywhere. Republic and Separatist forces are clashing across dozens of systems simultaneously, and one of the first major flashpoints in the canonical story is a planet called Cristophsis. Cristophsis is gorgeous and horrible at the same time. The whole planet is covered in enormous crystalline formations, massive blue-green spires jutting out of the landscape like a giant geological accident, and the cities are built between them and on top of them. It sounds like a nice place to visit. When you've got 2 armies grinding through it with artillery and battle droids, it stops being charming pretty quickly. The Separatists had locked the planet down completely. Senator Bail Organa was trapped on the surface, with civilians running out of food and supplies, and a Separatist naval blockade overhead led by Admiral Trench was making resupply runs nearly impossible. Trench is one of those villains who doesn't get enough attention. A spider-like alien commander with a reputation going back decades. Anakin and Obi-Wan worked together to crack the blockade. Anakin used a prototype stealth ship with a cloaking device to run a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with Trench's flagship, eventually using the ship's own homing torpedoes against it by exploiting the fact that Trench had locked onto the stealth ship's magnetic signature. Trench's flagship went down, the blockade cracked, supplies got through. On the ground, things were simultaneously messier. Obi-Wan and Rex discovered they had a spy in their own ranks, a clone named Slick, who had decided the Jedi were incompetent commanders, leading his brothers into a war that would never end, and had been feeding Separatist intelligence from inside. Slick wasn't wrong about everything. His methods were destructive. He blew up most of the gunships and weapons depot before Rex and Cody caught him. But his core frustration, that clones were being used as disposable tools in a war nobody had asked them about, was something a lot of clones felt, and most of them buried. Rex and Cody caught him. The battle for Cristophsis was won. And then a shuttle arrived, and out stepped a Togruta girl, orange skin, white facial markings, head tails, maybe 14 years old, who introduced herself as Ahsoka Tano and announced she was there for Anakin Skywalker. He had been a Padawan himself not long ago. He'd barely been knighted, and knighting in this war had been rushed specifically because the Jedi were losing people faster than they could replace them. Some Padawans had their trials skipped entirely to fill the gap in numbers. He was still figuring out how to command a battalion, still adjusting to the weight of being responsible for thousands of clone lives. And the last thing he wanted was to be responsible for a kid on top of all that. He assumed Ahsoka was meant for Obi-Wan. He tried to hand her off. Obi-Wan, absolutely delighted by this development, made it very clear she was Anakin's problem. She had been assigned by Yoda, deliberately. This is one of those things that looks like chance, but absolutely was not. Yoda knew exactly what Anakin's greatest flaw was. He struggled with attachment. He struggled with loss. He had already lost his mother in a way that had done significant damage, and he was secretly married to a senator, which was something the entire Jedi Council diplomatically pretended not to notice. Giving Anakin someone to care for, someone he would have to teach and protect and eventually let go, was Yoda trying to address that wound in the most Yoda way possible. Ahsoka, for her part, had exactly zero interest in a reluctant master. She was sharp, fast, aggressive in her fighting style. She used a reverse grip on her lightsaber before she ever developed a second blade, which was unusual and effective and drove traditionalists crazy. And she had the confidence of someone who had always been told they were exceptional and had mostly found that to be correct. They were a disaster. They were also immediately effective together, which is sometimes how that works. The mission that came with Ahsoka's arrival was urgent and politically critical. Jabba the Hutt's son, a young Huttling named Rotta, had been kidnapped, and Count Dooku had engineered the whole thing specifically to frame the Jedi for it. The Hutts controlled vast hyperspace lanes that the Republic desperately needed access to for supply lines and troop movement. Lose the Hutts and the Republic's ability to wage war across the Outer Rim gets strangled. Dooku understood this, which is why he arranged the kidnapping, framed the Jedi as the culprits, and sent Asajj Ventress to make sure Rotta died before anyone could prove otherwise. Anakin and Ahsoka recovered Rotta from the planet Teth, navigating a vertical cliff-face monastery, fighting Ventress, keeping a sick baby Hutt alive through all of it, and then had to race to Tatooine to return him to Jabba. It worked, barely. Jabba got his son back, the Jedi were cleared, and the Hutt clan's hyperspace lanes stayed open for the Republic. What the mission actually accomplished, more than the political win, was forcing Anakin and Ahsoka to rely on each other in situations where neither of them had any other option. That's how that relationship was always going to have to start. Meanwhile, running parallel to all of this, Yoda had been dispatched to the coral moon of Ragosa, near the Toydarian system. The Republic wanted to establish a supply base on Toydaria, and King Katunko of the Toydarians had agreed to meet Yoda for secret negotiations. The moon itself was a strange, beautiful place. Its oceans had long dried up, leaving behind vast forests of dead coral standing like sculptures across the landscape. Neutral ground, theoretically safe. Dooku sent Asajj Ventress ahead of Yoda to make sure it didn't stay that way. Ventress jammed Yoda's communications in orbit, ambushed his ship with 2 separatist frigates, and forced him to abandon ship in an escape pod with only 3 clone troopers, Lieutenant Thaya, Jek, and Riss. The proposal Ventress put to Katunko was straightforward. If her droid army could stop 1 Jedi Master and 3 soldiers from reaching the rendezvous by sunset, Toydaria would join the Separatists. If Yoda got through, the Republic got their base. Yoda agreed to the terms. Then he walked into a coral forest with 3 clones and a battalion of battle droids waiting for him, and the droids found out very quickly why this particular 900-year-old creature was the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. He stopped to observe the landscape. He was having a genuinely good time, which is possibly the most terrifying thing about Yoda in combat. But the moment that actually mattered in that episode came inside a cave. The 3 clones were low on ammunition, outnumbered, starting to lose hope. Yoda asked them to take off their helmets. He looked at their faces, identical, every one of them, grown from the same template, and saw something different in each of them. He told them specifically what he saw. He spoke to Thaya, Jek, and Riss as individuals, not as soldiers, not as assets, as people. For a show that had just introduced these clone troopers a few episodes earlier, it was a meaningful flag being planted. The war was going to treat these men as expendable. The entire system was going to use them up and phase them out, and never ask once what they wanted. Yoda, in a cave on a dead coral moon, while a droid army circled outside, took the time to remind 3 of them that they were worth knowing. Katunko watched Yoda get through. He chose the Republic. Ventress tried to assassinate him on Dooku's orders when it became clear the mission had failed. Yoda disarmed her in seconds, returned her lightsabers almost as an afterthought, and sent her running. Toydaria joined the Republic. 1 more system secured, 1 more supply line protected, small pieces. But in a war this size, every piece mattered. Right, so, the war is maybe a few months old at this point. Republic forces are scrambling across the Outer Rim, trying to hold 100 fronts simultaneously, and General Grievous decides it's a good moment to deploy the single, most demoralizing weapon the Separatists had built since the war started. The Malevolence was a Subjugator-class heavy cruiser. It was enormous. We're talking about a ship nearly 5 kilometers long, bristling with conventional weapons, and carrying something that nobody in the Republic had ever encountered before: twin ion pulse cannons. The reason this weapon was so psychologically devastating was the helplessness. You couldn't fight it. You couldn't run from it once it fired. You could only watch your systems die and wait. The Republic couldn't even warn other fleets in time because the ships that encountered it didn't survive long enough to get a message out. For a while, entire Republic battle groups were simply disappearing. The first time we actually see the malevolence in action is in the Abrogado system. Jedi Master Plo Koon had tracked the ship there with a small fleet of 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers, the standard Republic warship, the big wedge-shaped ones, and moved in to engage it. Before the battle, he'd contacted Anakin and Ahsoka in the nearby Bith system to give his position. The Council had told everyone to stay back, that no ships could be spared for a rescue if things went wrong. Things went wrong immediately. The ion cannon fired. Plo Koon's entire fleet went dead in seconds. The turbolasers opened up on the disabled ships. 2 of the 3 Star Destroyers were destroyed outright. Plo Koon, Commander Wolf, and 2 clone troopers named Sinker and Boost managed to get into an escape pod before their ship was torn apart. And then Grievous deployed pod hunters, small automated craft, to sweep the debris field and methodically kill any survivors before anyone could reach them. Plo Koon, floating in a pod in the middle of a debris field with droids hunting him, did what Jedi Masters do. He went outside the pod in the vacuum, found the pod hunter closing in, and took it apart, which bought time, but also told Grievous there were still survivors worth sending more hunters after. Meanwhile, Ahsoka felt something through the Force. She couldn't explain it precisely. She just knew Plo Koon was alive somewhere in that system. She and Anakin had been told explicitly to stand down and rejoin the fleet. Anakin ignored that completely, took the Twilight, a battered freighter they'd picked up on Teth, flew it into the debris field, and followed Ahsoka's instincts to the right pod. They pulled Plo Koon and the surviving clones out with a tow cable, killed the lights on the Twilight to avoid detection, and sat completely still while the Malevolence's sensors swept over them. It worked, barely. Now the Republic knew what the weapon was. The problem was that Grievous already had his next target, the Khalida Shoals Medical Center, a secret Outer Rim facility treating over 60,000 wounded clone troopers. Take that out, and the Republic loses a massive chunk of its ability to recover and redeploy soldiers. It was a cold, calculated, strategic move. Anakin came up with a plan that the sensible half of his brain probably knew was bad, and the other half decided to try anyway. He took Shadow Squadron, a group of long-range Y-wing bombers, on a shortcut through the Khalida Nebula, a dense region of space crawling with massive Neebray mantas. They reached the Malevolence before it reached the medical station. The attack run stripped the ion cannon out, 2 direct proton torpedo hits into the cannon housing, causing it to implode and tear a massive hole through the side of the ship. The Malevolence was crippled, no longer a threat to the medical center, and the Republic fleet closed in to finish it. And then Padme arrived. She'd been summoned, supposedly for a diplomatic meeting, a request that in hindsight had Palpatine's fingerprints all over it in a way nobody stopped to examine, and her ship dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the damaged Malevolence. Grievous tractor-beamed her in before she could jump out. Now Anakin had a choice between completing the kill on the most dangerous warship the Separatists had and saving his wife, who the galaxy officially didn't know was his wife. That wasn't really a choice at all, and everyone in the room knew it. Padme and C-3PO had already gotten themselves off their ship before Grievous could reach them. Padme set the craft to self-destruct, and they ran. Grievous survived the explosion. Anakin and Obi-Wan boarded through a different approach, found Padme. And while Obi-Wan dealt with Grievous in the corridors, Anakin got to the bridge and did something elegant and ruthless. He didn't blow up the navigation computer, he reprogrammed it. He pointed the Malevolence directly at a nearby moon and locked the course in. Then they all got off before it hit. Grievous escaped. He always escaped. His pod punched clear of the Malevolence as it broke apart against the moon, and he was recovered and gone before the Republic could track him. And that's the pattern that defines the entire arc, and honestly, the entire war. The Republic wins the engagement, the weapon is destroyed, the immediate threat is neutralized, and Grievous survives to build something else, plan something else, cost the Republic more ships and more clones and more Jedi on the next engagement. He was never designed to be the weapon that won the war. He was designed to bleed the Republic continuously, keep the Jedi stretched across 100 fronts, make every victory feel incomplete, because the person responsible walked away from it. There's something interesting happening with Grievous in these early episodes that's worth pausing on. He was a Kaleesh warrior before the cybernetics, a military commander from a species with a warrior culture, someone who had fought real wars before any of this. He didn't become a separatist general out of ideology or politics. Dooku brought him in, the shuttle crash took most of his organic body, and what came out the other side was someone who had been rebuilt and redirected toward one specific purpose. He collected Jedi lightsabers, more like proof of concept. Each one was a demonstration that the Force didn't make you invincible, that the Jedi were not untouchable, that a machine with enough skill and no fear of pain could beat any one of them. The Republic spent the next 2 years trying to corner him, and never quite managed it. Every time they got close, he was already somewhere else, hitting something they couldn't afford to lose. He was the war's most consistent headache, and Dooku had built him exactly that way on purpose. Season 1, Episodes 19, 20 and 21. 3 episodes, all in a row, all worth watching if you want to understand what the Clone Wars was really trying to say about war and liberation. Ryloth is the homeworld of the Twi'leks, the species with the head tails. You've seen them everywhere in Star Wars. The planet itself is a tidally locked world, one face permanently toward its sun, one face permanently in darkness, and the Twi'leks built their civilization in the narrow habitable band between them. It was, even before the Clone Wars, a planet the Republic had largely overlooked, valuable for its spice production, occasionally noted in Senate sessions. But the Outer Rim gets less attention than the core worlds, and Ryloth was Outer Rim as Outer Rim gets. The Separatists invaded and locked it down completely. A Separatist naval blockade cut off the planet from all outside contact. The Techno-Union's Emir, Wat Tambor, was installed as ruler of the planet. He did what occupiers do. He starved the population, stripped the planet of its resources and treasures. Seriously, at one point you can see him loading what appears to be the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark onto his evacuation ship. The animators absolutely snuck that in, and used Twi'lek civilians as living shields around military positions to prevent Republic airstrikes from targeting them. Cham Syndulla had been fighting with a resistance movement the entire time, fighting with whatever weapons he had, protecting as many of his people as he could, watching them starve and die, while the Senate on Coruscant debated aid packages and diplomatic approaches from a very comfortable distance. Then the Republic finally showed. The campaign came in 3 phases, each one handled by a different Jedi, and each one showing a completely different face of what this war looked like, depending on who you were. Phase 1 was the space battle, breaking the Separatist blockade, commanded by Captain Martuk, and this is where Ahsoka's first real test as a commander happened. Anakin put her in charge of the attack squadron while he worked on a contingency plan. Ahsoka launched her fighters against the blockade, got drawn into a trap by Tuk, who had anticipated her approach, and lost most of her squadron in the engagement. Her flagship, the Defender, was badly damaged. Admiral Yularen was wounded. Ahsoka aborted the attack. The weight of that sits with her in the next scene in a way the show doesn't rush past. She's sitting next to an unconscious Yularen in the medical bay, apologizing quietly to someone who can't hear her. Those pilots are dead because of a decision she made. She's maybe 15 years old, and she's already carrying that. She solves it by sacrificing the Defender itself, flying her damaged flagship unmanned on a direct collision course into Tuk's command ship, forcing him to evacuate and scatter the blockade formation. It works, the blockade breaks. But the solution to her first failure was destroying another one of her own ships. That's a complicated lesson to absorb. Phase 2 was the ground campaign. Obi-Wan led a small clone force into the city of Nabut to destroy proton cannons that were preventing the Republic landing ships from touching down. Tambor had positioned Twi'lek civilians directly around each cannon as living shields, calculating correctly that the Republic wouldn't order airstrikes on their own people. Obi-Wan's standing order to his clones was simple, not a single civilian casualty. He was going to dismantle those cannons without killing a single Twi'lek. In a town full of battle droids, gut-cur creatures, enormous predatory things like giant armored centipedes, and a tactical droid commander named TX-20, who had mapped out every possible approach. What makes this episode is 2 clone troopers named Waxer and Boyle, who stumble across a Twi'lek girl hiding alone in the ruins. Her name is Numa. She's maybe 6 or 7 years old, doesn't speak basic, terrified of soldiers and droids equally. Waxer decides to help her anyway. Boyle thinks this is a waste of time. Numa slowly, very carefully starts to trust them. By the end of the episode, Numa is the one who leads them through the underground passages to reach TX-20's position. She's learned a word in Basic. When they have to leave with the army, she calls after them in Twi'leki. Obi-Wan translates it for the clones. Nera, it means brother. Waxer and Boyle wave back and march toward the next battle. That's the scene. That's the whole thing. Two clones who were told they were identical to each other, interchangeable, grown for war, and a child who sees two brothers. It's doing a lot of quiet work. Phase 3. The city was defended by a plasma bridge. The only way in or out was a single energy bridge that could be raised or lowered, and Tambor was using it as a choke point. Republic forces were stretched too thin to take it head-on. Mace needed Cham Syndulla and his resistance fighters. Cham's people starved. And the Republic, the galaxy-spanning Republic with its Senate and its emergency powers and its brand new clone army, hadn't managed to get food through to a planet that was dying. When Mace Windu showed up months later with ATTE walkers and gunships and told Cham they were here to help, Cham's response was essentially, "Where were you before?" That tension runs through every conversation Cham has with Mace and with Senator Ornfrey Tar, Ryloth's own senator, who had spent the entire occupation safe on Coruscant. Cham and Tar were political rivals before the war. Cham a resistance fighter, Tar a political operator, who Cham considered corrupt and self-serving. The Senate had been aware of what was happening on Ryloth. Tar had been on Coruscant. The Republic had come now because Ryloth was strategically useful. Cham's line to Mace, delivered with the kind of tired precision of someone who has thought about it for months, is the most important thing anyone says in this entire arc. Another armed occupation is not a free Ryloth. How long before I am fighting you, Master Jedi? Mace doesn't have a satisfying answer. He promises the Republic will leave when the job is done. Cham doesn't believe him, cooperates anyway, because the Separatists are bombing inhabited villages and his people are dying right now, and the two of them take Lesu together. Tambor is captured trying to flee with his stolen treasure. Ryloth is declared liberated. The Republic wins. The parade happens. The clones march through the capital, while the Twi'lek population cheers. And then the Republic leaves. No reconstruction effort, no food supply established, no infrastructure rebuilt. The Senate debates aid packages for Ryloth for months after the battle. Some aid eventually trickles through in insufficient quantities. The planet that had been stripped and starved by the Separatists was now free, technically free, and largely on its own. Cham had predicted this. He spent the years after the Clone Wars building his resistance into something capable of fighting whoever came next. When the Empire replaced the Republic, he was ready. He fought the Empire on Ryloth for decades. His daughter Hera, who you meet in Rebels, grew up in that fight. A child of liberation who never got to live in an actually free world. The Republic freed Ryloth in 3 military engagements, and then forgot about it. The consequences of that forgetting outlasted the Republic itself. And that is the first time the Clone Wars shows you the gap between what the Republic said it stood for and what it actually did when the war was over and the cameras were pointed somewhere else. Ryloth would not be the last time. It would be the template that repeated across the Outer Rim for the next 3 years. Show up, fight, declare victory, leave, let the people who actually live there deal with the wreckage. Bye. We're heading back to Geonosis. The Republic had already fought one battle there, the battle that started the entire war. The Separatist droid foundries on Geonosis had been producing battle droids for the Confederacy, and taking the planet had been one of the Republic's first strategic objectives. They took it, and then they left. A year later, roughly, Republic intelligence confirmed that Geonosis was manufacturing battle droids again. New facilities, underground foundries, rebuilt in the months after the Republic pulled out, hidden beneath the surface of the planet in networks of caves and catacombs that were significantly harder to find and significantly harder to destroy than anything the Republic had faced in Round 1. The Geonosians, led by Archduke Poggle the Lesser, had spent the entire interval between battles building something better and burying it deeper. The Republic's answer was a 3-pronged assault. Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ki-Adi-Mundi, each commanding a separate attack column, hitting different sectors of the planet simultaneously. Anakin and Ahsoka bringing reinforcements from a separate engagement. Luminara Unduli, operating independently in a fourth sector. The idea was to overwhelm Geonosian defences across multiple fronts, so nothing could be fully reinforced in time. It didn't go cleanly. They never do. Landing at Point Rain, Season 2, Episode 5, is one of the most purely brutal combat episodes in the entire series. The landing itself was a disaster. Separatist air defences tore through the Republic gunships before they could reach the designated landing zone. Obi-Wan's column made it in, but took heavy casualties in the descent. Ki-Adi-Mundi's gunship went down short of the target, forcing him and his surviving clones to fight through caves full of Geonosians on foot under fire with no air support. Anakin's group crash-landed even further out and had to fight their way to the landing zone through open terrain, while Separatist forces hit them from multiple directions. And the Geonosians themselves, this is something the show makes a point of. They were a species fighting on their own world, defending their planet against an invasion. There's a scene in Landing at Point Rain where Ki-Adi-Mundi watches clones use flamethrowers to clear Geonosians from a cave, and the shot is deliberately held long enough to make you uncomfortable. This was a war crimes conversation happening inside a children's cartoon in 2009, and it didn't flinch. Ki-Adi-Mundi's language about Geonosians during the battle, referring to them as animals, as a species incapable of reason, is one of the show's earliest examples of what prolonged warfare does to otherwise decent people. He's not wrong that they're enemies. He's very wrong about why they are. The three columns eventually linked up at Point Rain, the designated landing zone, and the ground campaign got organised enough to move toward the primary objective. The droid foundry, protected by a heavily shielded ray shield generator that had to be taken down before Republic forces could reach the factory itself. Season 2, Episode 6, is where Ahsoka and a Jedi named Barriss Sophie become the people who actually win the battle. Anakin and Luminara took the outside, attacking the ray shield generator and the super tanks defending it, drawing attention and taking punishment. Ahsoka and Barriss went underground, through the Geonosian tunnel network, infiltrating the factory from beneath. The plan was for them to plant charges and destroy the factory, while Anakin and Luminara collapsed the bridge the super tanks were using outside, buying time. It almost went exactly wrong. The tunnel route was harder and longer than anticipated. By the time Ahsoka and Barriss reached the factory's central reactor, the outside attack had been pushed back. Anakin and Luminara couldn't hold the position much longer, and Ahsoka made the call to detonate anyway, with her and Barriss still inside. The explosion brought the factory down around them. They survived by sealing themselves inside one of the super tanks, which was heavy enough to hold up under the collapsing ceiling. When Anakin dug them out of the rubble, and he went in personally, without waiting for equipment, digging through wreckage with his hands because Ahsoka was in there, he was not calm about it. He tried to be. Anakin had spent the entire arc being the commander who took reckless risks to achieve objectives and pushed his people hard in the process. Ahsoka had learned that from him. Watching her nearly die in a collapsing factory because she applied his own tactical logic was an uncomfortable mirror, and the show lets that land without spelling it out. The factory was gone. The mission was technically accomplished, and then it kept going. Luminara had been captured during the post-battle chaos and taken underground. Obi-Wan and Anakin led a rescue force into the Geonosian catacombs beneath the surface. The Geonosians had a queen, Karina the Great, an enormous creature living in the deepest part of the underground complex, surrounded by reanimated Geonosian soldiers, reanimated bodies, controlled by parasitic brainworms that Karina birthed and deployed through her hosts. Dead Geonosians walking, following orders, fighting with the stored muscle memory of living soldiers and none of the self-preservation instincts. The Republic clones who went into those tunnels faced something that bullets slowed but didn't stop. In total darkness, in an environment the Geonosians had built over centuries. Luminara was alive. Karina had kept her that way because she wanted a Force-sensitive host for the brainworms, something that would give her access to a Jedi's capabilities. Obi-Wan and Anakin got her out. They captured Poggle the Lesser in the process. Karina was buried when the clones caused a cave-in to seal the tunnels. Though given how extensive the catacomb network was, nobody was entirely certain she was dead. Season 2, Episode 8 made that uncertainty relevant almost immediately. Ahsoka and Barriss were transporting Poggle aboard a medical frigate when Geonosian brainworms, hidden in a food container from the surface, began infecting the clone crew. One by one, the troopers on the ship fell under the worms' control, still wearing clone armor, still carrying clone weapons, still moving in coordinated Republic formation, but now working to kill Ahsoka, Barriss, and eventually everyone aboard. Barriss got infected. Ahsoka had to fight her friend while trying to figure out how to stop the worms without killing the people they were controlling. The solution she found was brutal and simple. Brainworms couldn't survive extreme cold. She flooded the ship's systems with freezing air, which killed the worms, but nearly killed every infected person on board in the process. It worked. Most of the clones survived. Barriss recovered. Anakin, when he found out how Ahsoka had handled it, told her she'd made the right call. The correct tactical decision in that situation was the one that risked her friend's life to save everyone else. And Ahsoka had made it alone, under pressure, without anyone to ask. She was 16, more or less. The Republic won the Second Battle of Geonosis. They destroyed the factory, captured Poggle, cleared the surface. By any military accounting, it was a success. The campaign cost weeks of sustained combat, thousands of clone lives, multiple Jedi injured or captured and recovered, a near-catastrophic biological incident on a medical ship. And within a relatively short period of time, Geonosian manufacturing was operational again. Somewhere else, deeper underground. In tunnels the Republic didn't know about yet. The Republic could commit Jedi Masters, clone battalions, sustained orbital bombardment, and multiple coordinated assault columns to Geonosis, win every single engagement on the surface, and still not solve the underlying problem. Because the Geonosians were still there, and the planet was still theirs, and as long as both those things were true, production would resume wherever it could. Now, let's talk about the clones. We've spent time watching battles, and throughout all of it, in every single engagement, the people actually taking the most casualties and doing the most fighting were the clone troopers. They've been in the background of every story we've told so far. Because the thing about the clone army that the Republic never really reckoned with, and that the show goes out of its way to make you reckon with, even when the Senate and the Jedi Council wouldn't. These men are people. They have personalities, preferences, senses of humour, fears, loyalties, opinions about each other and about the war. They give each other nicknames, they argue, they grieve, they develop specific individual relationships with the Jedi they serve under. Every single clone in that army, despite sharing identical faces and identical genetic code, was a distinct human being. They were grown in vats on Kamino, from the genetic template of Jango Fett, engineered to mature at twice the normal human rate. So a 10-year-old clone was physically 20, and by the time they were fully deployed, they were already approaching middle age biologically, while still being relatively young in terms of lived experience. The Kaminoans modified Jango's base genetics to make the clones more obedient, less aggressive than their template, more inclined to follow orders without questioning them. And then, as we covered back, they installed behavioural modification chips in every clone's brain. Chips that nobody outside of the Sith fully understood the purpose of yet. The system that created them never intended for them to be people. It intended for them to be weapons that happened to be biological. The Kaminoans referred to clones who didn't meet the physical or behavioural standards as defectives and wanted them removed from the program. The Republic paid for the army, but rarely asked hard questions about how it was produced. The Jedi were given command of soldiers, they'd had no hand in training, and were expected to treat them as troops rather than individuals. And yet, every single time the show actually lets you spend time with clones, what you find is unmistakably human. In Clone Cadets, Season 3, Episode 1, which chronologically is the beginning of this story, even though it aired in Season 3, 5 cadets, known collectively as Domino Squad, are failing their graduation exercises. The test is simple in theory. Get your squad to the top of a fortified training citadel, take out the practice droids, capture the beacon. Bravo Squad does it in record time. Domino Squad falls apart every single time because they cannot function as a unit. Their problem isn't ability. Every one of them is physically capable. The problem is that they're 5 individuals who haven't figured out how to be a team. and the pressure of failure is making each of them worse instead of better. Heavy, CT-782, is the most physically gifted of them, naturally suited to heavy weapons, and he's convinced he'd be better off alone or in a different squad. Echo repeats orders back compulsively, which drives everyone around him insane. Fives is trying to hold things together, but doesn't have the authority to do it. They bicker. They fail the test. The Kaminoans want to wash them out and send them to maintenance. Maintenance means 99. 99 is a clone who came out of the vats with severe physical deformities, hunched, slow, unable to pass any training standard. The Kaminoans had decided he was a defective and assigned him to cleaning duty on Kamino for the rest of his life. He pushed carts through corridors, maintained the barracks, ran supplies between levels. That was his entire existence. He was also, very quietly, one of the wisest characters in the show. He found Heavy in the middle of the night, packing his things, planning to go rather than face failing out. And instead of reporting him or trying to talk him out of it with logic, 99 just sat with him and told him what he saw. He told Heavy that his squad needed him. Not needed his skills, needed him specifically, as a person, as the member of their team, who believed in hitting problems directly while everyone else was overthinking. He told Heavy that he was someone, that CT-782 was a real name for a real person, and that person had something to give his brothers. Heavy gave 99 his graduation medal at the ceremony afterward, told him to keep it until he got back. He never got back. In Rookies, Season 1, Episode 5, which chronologically follows right after, Domino's squad has shipped out to their first posting, a listening outpost on the Rishi moon, a frozen barren rock at the edge of the outer rim. Heavy is openly miserable. He trained to fight, and he's filing routine negative status reports in a box on a moon nobody cares about. Then the Separatists arrived. Commando droids, a more advanced model than standard battle droids, capable of passing as clones in armor from a distance, landed during a meteor shower and hit the outpost fast. Sergeant O'Niner, the veteran in command, was killed in the initial breach. Droid Bait was killed seconds later. Cut Up made it outside with Heavy, Echo and Fives, and then a Rishi eel, a massive predatory creature that lived in the moon's cave systems, came out of the rock and ate him before anyone could react. 3 members of Domino's squad dead inside the first few minutes. 2 of them didn't even have time to process what was happening. Fives, Echo and Heavy were hiding in a crater below the outpost when Rex and Cody arrived for a routine inspection. Rex, suspicious immediately because something felt wrong, spotted a warning flare the rookies had fired. The commando droids had taken over the base and were transmitting a false all-clear signal, trying to clear the way for a separatist attack on Kamino itself. If that signal kept transmitting, an entire fleet would reach Kamino before anyone in the Republic knew there was a problem. They took the base back. Rex, Cody, Heavy, Fives, and Echo fighting through commando droids in corridors they'd cleaned and maintained and stared at for weeks. They cleared the base, and then they realized the problem. The false all-clear signal was still transmitting from a secondary control panel, and the only way to stop it was to destroy the entire outpost from the inside. The detonator failed, the bomb was set, the timer was running, and the remote wasn't working. Heavy told the others to go. They argued. He was faster than the argument. He went back inside. He was shot multiple times before he reached the panel. When the droids surrounded him, he told them he didn't take prisoners, and then he detonated the charges manually. The signal stopped. The fleet was warned. Kamino was safe. Rex filed Heavy's name, one clone trooper in a war with hundreds of thousands of them, on a frozen moon nobody had ever heard of, who made a choice when the detonator failed and chose his brothers over himself. Fives and Echo were brought into the 501st Legion after Rishi. That's where their story continues, and Fives especially is going to have one of the most significant individual arcs in the entire series. It's 20 BBY. Even PL was captured by the Separatists while commanding a Republic fleet. PL was a small, tough, battle-scarred Lannic, a species with elongated ears and a general demeanour that suggested he'd seen significantly worse than whatever was currently happening. The Nexus route, a secret hyperspace lane that, if properly exploited, would give whoever controlled it rapid strategic access to key systems on both sides of the war. The Separatists wanted that information badly enough to build an entire operation around capturing him. Before his ship was taken, Piel split the coordinates. He memorized half himself and gave the other half to his fleet captain, a Republic naval officer named Wilhuff Tarkin. The prison holding them was called the Citadel. It was located on Lola Sayu, a volcanic world covered in lava fields, with an orbital defense system that made any direct approach suicidal. The Citadel itself had been specifically designed and built for one purpose: holding Jedi. It was full of ray shields that responded to force use, electromagnetic systems that could disable lightsabers, sensor grids calibrated to detect any unauthorized movement, and a Nuba tracking creatures that hunted by scent through the tunnel systems. Warden O.C. Sobek ran the place with the kind of enthusiasm for cruelty that made him effective at his job. The Jedi Council's assessment was honest. This was nearly impossible. The Citadel had been built specifically to counter their capabilities. Any direct assault would fail before it reached the walls. The information Piel was holding could not be allowed to reach Dooku. Anakin had a plan, unhinged one, which is how you know it might actually work. He had the entire strike team, Obi-Wan, Rex, Cody, Ahsoka, Echo, Fives, and several other clones, sealed in carbonite. The same carbon freezing process used on Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back, which the show is clearly and happily referencing. R2-D2 piloted a shuttle with a team of reprogrammed battle droids, carrying the frozen humans through the Citadel's orbital checkpoints. The lifeform scanners found nothing, because the team was biologically inert. They cleared security and made it to the surface. Ahsoka was not supposed to be there. Anakin had explicitly told her this mission was too dangerous, and she was staying behind. She was released from carbonite with the rest of the team, looked at Anakin's face, and immediately started explaining that she had received orders from Master Plo Koon. Anakin asked Plo Koon about this when they got back. Plo Koon covered for her with the diplomatic flexibility of someone who understood exactly what had happened and had decided that arguing about it retroactively was pointless. The infiltration worked up to a point. They found Piel, freed him from a torture session that had been going very badly for him. A droid interrogator had been working through increasingly aggressive methods to extract the Nexus coordinates, and was approximately 3 seconds from irreversible eye damage when the team came through the wall. They found Tarkin and the other officers in a secondary cell block deeper in the facility. And this is where Wilhuff Tarkin enters the story. He was, at this point in the timeline, a Republic Navy captain. Sharp, cold, precise in his language and his thinking, with a military bearing that suggested he'd been born standing at attention. You could see immediately, watching him interact with the rescue team, that he had very specific opinions about how wars should be fought, and that those opinions did not include any of the Jedi's particular concerns about proportionality, civilian risk, or the moral weight of methods. Tarkin's view, stated with complete calm and no apparent awareness that anyone might disagree, was that wars were won by the side willing to do whatever was necessary, and that any restraint beyond tactical necessity was a liability. He wasn't sadistic, he wasn't emotional about it. He simply believed that the Jedi Code, applied to military command, was a handicap the Republic couldn't afford. He and Obi-Wan did not get along. Obi-Wan's entire approach to the war, and to this mission specifically, was built around minimizing casualties, maintaining the integrity of his team, honoring commitments made in the field. Tarkin found this admirable, in theory, and dangerously naive in practice. Their exchanges throughout the arc had the particular tension of two competent people who fundamentally disagreed about the most important question in front of them. He and Anakin understood each other almost immediately. That's the thing the arc is quietly building across all 3 episodes. Tarkin watched Anakin operate, the carbonite plan, the willingness to cut through problems directly, the focus on the objective above all other considerations, the way he handled obstacles by removing them with whatever was available, rather than looking for the cleanest solution. He approved of all of it, not in the way Obi-Wan approved of Anakin, with affection and occasional exasperation and a running awareness of the cost. Tarkin approved of Anakin the way you approve of a useful tool that functions exactly as designed. Anakin, for his part, found in Tarkin someone who spoke his language, someone who thought winning was the point and that everything else was negotiable. That was a genuinely dangerous thing for Anakin to find at this stage of the war, and the show doesn't underline it too heavily. It just lets the camera linger on their interactions long enough for you to feel the alignment. The escape from the Citadel was brutal. PL's team and Tarkin's team had split up after the rescue, so that if one group was captured, the enemy would only have half the coordinates. The shuttle they were supposed to escape on was destroyed before they could board it. They were now on foot on a volcanic planet with Sobek's full forces hunting them through lava fields, while Plo Koon commanded a task force outside the orbital defense system, trying to find a way to punch through and extract them. Clones died in the lava fields. Umbara tracked the team through the terrain, closing from behind while crab droids cut off the routes ahead. Even PL, who had survived the Citadel's interrogation, was killed by an Umbara attack during the final push to the extraction point. Before he died, he gave Ahsoka his half of the Nexus coordinates, with specific instructions to deliver them to the Jedi Council and no one else. Tarkin, back on Coruscant, delivered his half directly to Chancellor Palpatine and no one else. So the mission that had cost PL his life. Several clones, a significant Republic task force, and weeks of planning ended with the Nexus route coordinates split between the Jedi Council and the Chancellor, two separate parties who would then have to negotiate access to the full picture, which, given that Palpatine was secretly Darth Sidious and the Jedi Council didn't know that, meant the coordinates were effectively useless. You can't do anything with half a hyperspace route. The final scene of Citadel Rescue is Anakin and Tarkin shaking hands on the landing platform, while Obi-Wan watches from a few steps back. The sound designers put a brief fragment of the Imperial March, Darth Vader's theme, under the moment. The Republic's future military architect and the Empire's future enforcer, becoming friends in the aftermath of a separatist prison break. Neither of them knew yet what they were to each other in the larger story, but the show did. There's a line Obi-Wan delivers at the end of the arc, responding to Anakin's argument that the Jedi needed to be more ruthless to win the war. He says, "If we sacrifice our code, even for victory, we may lose that which is most important, our honor." It's a good line, it's the right position, and it is also within the logic of what the Clone Wars was doing to the Jedi institution, episode by episode and arc by arc, a position that was getting harder and harder to hold. Before we get into it, this is the arc most Clone Wars fans point to as the moment the show became something different, that earns being difficult to watch, that stays with you. If someone asks you where to start with Clone Wars, you send them to Umbara, and then you warn them first. Umbara was a shadowy world, perpetually dark, its surface covered in alien bioluminescent flora and fauna that glowed purple and blue in the darkness, gorgeous in a deeply hostile way. The planet's senator had been assassinated on Coruscant, and Umbara had immediately defected to the Separatists, which meant the Republic needed to take it back fast before Separatist forces could dig in and fortify the capital. Anakin led the 501st Legion in the initial assault, clones landing in the dark, fighting Umbarans, who knew their own terrain perfectly, taking the first ridge at significant cost. Then Anakin was recalled to Coruscant. Palpatine had requested him personally for something. He left his clones in the middle of a live combat situation, handing command to a Jedi general named Pong Krell. Pong Krell was, on paper, one of the most decorated Jedi commanders in the war. High casualty rates on his campaigns, yes, but also high success rates. The Jedi Council had looked at those numbers and approved his assignment. What the numbers didn't show, and what Rex clocked within the first few hours of the handover, was that the casualty rates weren't an unfortunate side effect of Krell's tactics. They were a feature. Krell was a Basilisk, a large four-armed species who carried two double-bladed lightsabers and had the bearing of someone who considered everyone around him beneath his notice. From the moment he took command, he refused to call the clones by their names. He called them by their numbers. He treated the distinction as irrelevant. And when Rex tried to explain why names mattered to unit cohesion, Krell looked at him with genuine confusion, the way you'd look at a piece of equipment complaining about being misused. His first orders sent clones into completely exposed positions against fortified Umbaran resistance. Rex watched men die for objectives that could have been taken at a fraction of the cost with any reasonable tactical adjustment. He requested a different approach. Krell denied it and told him to follow orders. In The General, Season 4, Episode 8, Fives and Hardcase found a solution. Umbaran starfighters, parked inside a captured airbase, could be used to knock out a separatist supply ship that was resupplying the Umbaran ground forces. Without that supply line, the Umbaran resistance would collapse faster and save lives overall. Krell had already refused to request Republic air support for the attack, so Fives, Hardcase and Jesse stole 3 Umbaran fighters and did it themselves without authorization, in ships none of them had ever flown. Improvising the controls through the engagement, they destroyed the supply ship. The tactical situation improved immediately and significantly, and Krell had them arrested for insubordination and sentenced to death by firing squad. That's the scene that stops you cold. Fives and Jesse standing in the jungle in front of a line of their own brothers with blasters raised. And the clones in the firing squad, soldiers who knew Fives, who served with him, who understood that he had just saved their lives, were being ordered to shoot him anyway, because a Jedi general said so, because the chain of command said so, because disobeying a direct order was the greater crime than the thing the order was asking them to do. The firing squad aimed, and then nobody shot. The clones in the line looked at Fives and Jesse, at brothers they knew, whose faces they shared, and lowered their weapons. One by one, clones refusing a Jedi general's direct order, out of the particular moral logic that had always governed how clones actually operated, which was loyalty to their brothers first, and the Republic second, and the abstract chain of command somewhere further down. Krell moved on, furious, and gave his next order. He had received intelligence, he said, of enemy forces in clone armor infiltrating Republic lines. 2 groups of clone troopers were to intercept and engage them. Both groups moved out in the dark. Umbara's perpetual night swallowed the jungle, and the 2 groups found each other and opened fire. It was the 501st and the 212th, Rex's men and Cody's men, shooting each other in the dark in borrowed enemy armor, neither side knowing who they were actually fighting until the killing had been going on long enough for someone to grab a helmet off a soldier they'd just shot. Waxer was there, the same Waxer from Ryloth, who had found a little Twi'lek girl hiding in the ruins of her village and learned that Nera meant brother. He was dying in the Umbaran jungle, shot by men from his own army, and with his last breath he looked at Rex and asked what had happened. Rex could only tell him the truth. Someone had given them bad intel. Someone had made them do this. Waxer died without knowing it had been deliberate. The truth was already obvious by that point, but Krell's interrogation confirmed it directly. He had foreseen the fall of the Republic, of the Jedi Order destroyed, a new galactic power rising in its place. He had decided, with the cold pragmatism of someone who genuinely believed they were making a rational choice, that the winning side was the one worth joining. He had been feeding intelligence to the Umbarans, sabotaging Republic operations, deliberately getting clones killed to demonstrate his value to Count Dooku. His plan was to offer Dooku a weakened Republic army as proof of his usefulness and become the new Sith apprentice. He hadn't felt regret about any of it. The clones were bred in a laboratory, he told Rex. They weren't people, they were instruments. Rex had one question after the confession. Did Krell know, at some level, that what he'd seen in those visions was going to happen regardless of what he did? Krell smiled and didn't answer. Krell was in the brig. The clones were deciding what to do with him. The Jedi Council needed to be informed. Krell needed to be transported back, tried, processed, through whatever accountability structure the Order maintained for situations like this. Rex gave the order to open the cell door and try to take him in. Krell tore through the clones with both double-bladed sabers and made it halfway across the airbase before Tup lured him into a Vixus plant, a massive carnivorous organism in the jungle that grabbed Krell by the limbs and held him still long enough for the clones to stun him. Stunned, in a cage, unable to move, and Rex stood in front of him with a blaster, knowing he didn't have the authority to execute a prisoner, and knowing that a live Krell was a perpetual security threat, and knowing that the Jedi Council would conduct a review, and that review might go in unpredictable directions. He hesitated. Krell mocked him for it, started listing the reasons Rex didn't have the capability to do what was necessary, and Krell was mid-sentence when a shot came from behind Rex and knocked him sideways. Dogma. Of all the clones in the 501st Dogma, was the one who had believed most completely in the chain of command. Rules existed for reasons. Orders came from authority that existed for reasons. Questioning your commanding officer was a step toward chaos, and chaos got people killed. He had argued with Fives about this. He had supported Krell's authority when the rest of the unit was already suspicious. He had been the one who arrested Fives and Jesse and brought them to the firing squad, following orders because that was what soldiers did. He was standing over Krell's body with a blaster he'd taken from Fives' holster, looking at Rex, and what he said was simple. Krell had used him, used his loyalty, used his belief in the system, used everything Dogma had been raised to be, as a weapon against his brothers. He had killed Krell because that's what the man was, a traitor who had gotten clones killed, and the rule that said you didn't execute prisoners was a rule Krell had already broken when he sentenced Fives to death in the jungle. The final conversation of the arc is Rex and Fives sitting together in the aftermath, watching the wounded being loaded onto transports. Dathomir was one of those planets that felt genuinely alien, even by Star Wars standards. Perpetually shrouded in fog, covered in dark forests and ancient stone structures, with a red sky that managed to look both beautiful and deeply wrong. The Night Sisters lived there, a matriarchal clan of Force witches who called their power the magic rather than the Force, channeled it through incantations and rituals and objects rather than through the discipline the Jedi practiced, and wanted absolutely nothing to do with either the Republic or the Separatists. They were older than both. They operated by entirely different rules. Mother Talzin led them. She was ageless in the way powerful dark side users sometimes became, and she had a gift for reading events that ran ahead of conventional intelligence. She had plans that nobody outside her immediate circle ever fully understood, and she executed them with the patience of someone who had been playing a long game for decades. Asajj Ventress was raised on Dathomir. Born a Night Sister, she was given away as an infant to protect the clan from an outside threat, handed to a crime lord, eventually found by a Jedi named Kynarek, who trained her until he was killed, and then she fell into darkness and eventually found her way to Count Dooku, who took her as his assassin, an informal dark side apprentice. She served him for years. She was the best asset the Separatists had outside of Grievous. And then Darth Sidious told Dooku to kill her. His reasoning was simple. Ventress was growing too powerful. Dooku was developing an attachment to her that could complicate his obedience. The rule of two didn't allow for additional dark side apprentices. There was a master and there was Dooku, and anything beyond that was a threat to the hierarchy. Dooku received the order and followed it without hesitation, turning his own fleet against Ventress mid-battle and leaving her to die in space. She didn't die. She escaped, wounded and furious, and she went home. Talzin welcomed her back, and then Talzin started planning. The scheme across the Season 3 arc was a layered piece of work. Dooku came to Dathomir looking for a new assassin to replace Ventress. Talzin offered him one, a Night Brother, which was what the Night Sisters called the male Zabrak warriors who lived on the other side of the planet in a subservient clan relationship. Specifically, she offered him Savage Opress, a large, physically powerful Zabrak who she transformed through dark magic into something significantly more dangerous. What Dooku didn't know was that Savage was loyal to Ventress, not to him, and the plan was to place a Night Sister agent inside Dooku's inner circle and use him to kill the Count. Savage didn't work out as a controlled instrument. He was too powerful, too aggressive, and ultimately too independent. He turned on both Ventress and Dooku in the same fight and vanished into the Outer Rim, following something Talzin had whispered to him before he left, that he had a long-lost brother somewhere out there. The assassination attempt failed. Dooku survived, and he remembered exactly who had tried to kill him. His response was not immediate. He gave Grievous one order: go to Dathomir. Wipe out the Night Sisters, all of them. The phrasing was deliberate. It was the same order Darth Sidious had given before the Battle of Naboo, and the intent was identical. Massacre, Season 4, Episode 19. Grievous arrived with a full droid army, landing on Dathomir's surface and pushing toward the Night Sister settlement. Ventress was there, having returned to fully join her sisters after everything with Dooku had collapsed. She led the combat response. The Night Sisters were formidable fighters. Their magic gave them abilities the droids couldn't anticipate, and Ventress personally dueled Grievous to a standstill and was winning. So Grievous ordered his droids to attack, while he was still technically in single combat with her. The agreement to fight one-on-one lasted as long as it was useful to him, which was not long at all. The defoliator tanks moved in, incendiary weapons that burned organic material while leaving metal unharmed, specifically designed for clearing enemy troops. Mother Talzin went to their eldest, Old Darka, hidden in a cave deep in the settlement's catacombs. Old Darka performed a ritual that raised the dead, previous Night Sisters, buried in their pods, coming back as zombies to fight for the living. It was exactly as strange as it sounds, and the image of an army of undead Night Sisters tearing through battle droid formations, for a moment it turned the battle. Grievous was actually overwhelmed, the droids were being pushed back, and Talzin was simultaneously channeling her power through a voodoo effigy of Dooku, a lock of his hair she'd kept for years, exactly for a moment like this, torturing him on Sereno from across the galaxy. Dooku, writhing in agony on his throne, managed to get a transmission to Grievous before Talzin finished it. Grievous broke off his own engagement, located the cave where Daka was chanting, and killed her. The moment she died, every undead Night Sister collapsed. The army was gone. The Night Sisters, already badly depleted, were suddenly massively outnumbered again. The droids opened fire. Ventress ran. She was wounded, her sisters were dying around her, and there was nothing left to do on that field. Grievous pushed toward Talzin, who dissolved into green smoke just before he could reach her. It worked, but it cost her. She survived the massacre as a weakened, scattered presence, able to appear in visions and whispers, but no longer capable of direct action in the world. Dathomir was left mostly silent. The Night Sister Order, which had existed for centuries before the Jedi or Sith had reached their current forms, was effectively destroyed in one afternoon. Ventress wandered through the burned forest afterward, and Talzin appeared to her as a faint luminescent presence. Ventress's future was no longer with the Night Sisters. There was nothing left to return to. She had a new path, though Talzin couldn't or wouldn't tell her what it was. Then the apparition faded, and Ventress was alone in the ruins of her home. What the Sith take away from Dathomir was simple. They tolerated no independent dark side power in the galaxy. The Night Sisters hadn't attacked the Sith, hadn't threatened Sidious's plans directly, hadn't declared any allegiance in the war. What they'd done was attempt to use a Sith Lord as a piece in their own game, and the Sith response was to remove them from the board entirely. Talzin had understood this principle for years. She'd known that the moment the Sith became aware of Dathomir as anything more than a backwater planet, the clock started. She'd survived it anyway, operating in the margins, pulling threads from a distance. She would keep doing that, her presence threads through the later Maul storylines in ways that matter. But Dathomir, as a living tradition, as a culture, that was gone. Ventress became a mercenary, a bounty hunter, a woman defined entirely by what she'd lost. She'd been betrayed by the only person she'd trusted, survived the destruction of the only place she'd belonged, and walked away from both with nothing but her lightsabers and the very specific skill set that comes from spending years as the galaxy's most dangerous assassin. Now, let's talk about the moment that absolutely shocked people when it aired. The Phantom Menace came out in 1999. Darth Maul was in it for maybe 15 minutes of actual screen time, said approximately 3 lines of dialogue, and was cut in half by a Padawan over a reactor shaft on Naboo. He fell. The movie moved on. The audience assumed that was that cool villain short story done. That assumption held for 13 years. In Season 3, Episode 14, the very last shot of the episode was Mother Talzin telling Savage Opress that he had a long-lost brother, and that this brother would teach him. The brother's name was never said out loud. It didn't need to be. Lotho Minor was a junk planet, literally a world covered in the discarded refuse of civilization. Mountains of broken machinery and scrap metal stretching across the entire surface, with acid rain that fell regularly, and a population of scavengers and low-life traders who had found the place useful for reasons no one looked at too closely. It was, in every conceivable way, the least dignified place in the galaxy to end up. Savage Opress had been given an amulet by Mother Talzin that would lead him to his brother. It brought him to Dathomir, into the tunnel networks beneath the junk fields, guided by a local creature named Morley, who turned out to be leading Savage directly into a trap. Morley had been feeding whatever lived in those tunnels for years, trading prey for protection. He called his contact Master. What came out of the dark was Darth Maul, or what was left of him. He moved on 6 mechanical spider legs built from scrap droid parts, cobbled together from whatever he could find in the junk around him. His torso was emaciated, his horns grown long and unkempt, his eyes wild. He grabbed Savage, flung him against the tunnel wall, and started speaking in fragments, disconnected words and half sentences, cycling through obsession, rage, and something that sounded close to grief. He said Jedi. He said revenge, meaning Obi-Wan, had taken his legs. He said mercy was a lie. A decade of solitude on a garbage planet, surviving on vermin, kept alive by a single fixation, the face of the Jedi who had cut him in half. Savage got him off the planet. They went to Dathomir. Talzin had expected this. She brought Maul to the site of what had been the Night Sister village, already ruined from Grievous's massacre, and performed the restoration there in the fog and the wreckage. The spider legs were removed. New mechanical legs, built from separatist droid parts through Night Sister magic, replaced them, talon-like, functional, humanoid enough that Maul could walk and fight again. And then Talzin reached into his fractured mind and put it back together. The moment his sanity returned is one of the better acted scenes in the show. Sam Witwer voiced Maul throughout the series, and the shift from the broken, feral creature in the tunnels to the calm, focused, dangerous person who stood up on new legs and looked at Savage with clear eyes was immediate and cold. The intelligence came back fully formed. The discipline came back. The hatred came back, sharper now for having been compressed into a single point for 10 years. He took stock of where things stood. The Clone Wars had started without him. A war, galaxy-wide, 2 sides grinding against each other, and he hadn't been part of it. He told Savage that he had been robbed of his destiny. He was supposed to be more than an apprentice. Sidious had used him as a weapon and discarded him and moved on, and the galaxy had kept going without him, like he had never existed. He and Savage travelled to a village on the planet Raydonia, in the Outer Rim, and killed everyone there. They sent a transmission to the Jedi Council with the image of the bodies and a message. "Come alone, Kenobi." The Council saw the transmission and knew it was a trap. Obi-Wan knew it was a trap. He went anyway, alone, because the alternative was more dead civilians on more planets while he waited for a better option that wasn't coming. Maul had him within minutes of landing. Maul and Savage together, toying with Obi-Wan, taking turns, letting him understand clearly that he was not going to win this. Maul was not angry in the way you'd expect from someone who'd spent a decade obsessing over this moment. He was satisfied, methodical. He wanted Obi-Wan to understand exactly what was happening and why, to feel the helplessness of it. Obi-Wan survived because Asajj Ventress showed up. She had her own reasons for hunting Savage. He'd betrayed her back in the Season 3 arc, and she hadn't forgotten. And she found the situation on Raydonia through her own intelligence network. She pulled up in a ship, saw Obi-Wan getting beaten half to death, and made a pragmatic decision. Maul and Savage were a bigger problem than her existing issues with Kenobi. She woke Obi-Wan up, handed him one of her red lightsabers, and the two of them fought the brothers together. They didn't win, they got out. Jettisoned the ship's cockpit as an escape pod, while Maul and Savage were still in the main cabin, leaving the brothers drifting in space, while Obi-Wan and Ventress fled. Maul's final line of the episode was addressed to no one in particular. Watching the cockpit drift away, he said he could be patient. He had waited this long to kill Obi-Wan. He could wait a little more. He said it like someone who had genuinely found peace in the anticipation, which was more disturbing than anger would have been. The show never fully explained how Maul got from Naboo to Dathomir, or who partially rebuilt him with those first crude legs. The in-universe implication, heavily suggested by various sources, was that Sidious had Maul retrieved and left on Dathomir deliberately, as a contingency. Sidious didn't waste resources, and a dark side user with a personal vendetta against Obi-Wan Kenobi, kept alive in misery and fury, was exactly the kind of weapon you stored in a drawer and came back to when you needed it. If that's true, and the show strongly implies it is, then Maul's entire decade on that garbage planet was Sidious filing him away. The most dangerous thing Darth Sidious ever did wasn't any single act of violence or political manipulation. It was the patience, the willingness to leave a piece on the board and wait 20 years for the right moment to use it. The Mortis arc. Anakin, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are heading to a rendezvous point in space to meet Captain Rex. Standard mission, nothing unusual, but they pick up a signal, a very old signal, a frequency that the Jedi apparently used thousands of years ago. They fly toward it. Their ship loses power, and instead of finding Rex, they find a world that shouldn't exist, Mortis, a realm that exists outside any star system, maybe outside the galaxy entirely. Some Jedi over the millennia have whispered about it. Legends, stories, things passed down in the oldest texts. Nobody really believed it was real, and Qui-Gon Jinn, dead for over a decade at this point, appears as a vision on the surface to tell Obi-Wan that this place is a conduit through which the entire force of the universe flows. You are not in a normal place. The rules are different here. And then they meet the family. 3 beings, something so powerful that they can no longer live in the material galaxy without being a danger to everything around them. So they retreated to Mortis and stayed there, locked in an eternal arrangement, a father, a daughter, and a son. The daughter represents the light side, creation, peace, the living force. The son represents the dark side, destruction, death, appetite. And the father is the balance between them, the one holding it all together through sheer will, keeping his children from tearing each other and the cosmos apart. He's been doing this for so long that he's dying from the effort. What the father wants from Anakin, he wants him to stay. He wants the chosen one to take his place, to become the new balance between the son and the daughter, to hold the force in equilibrium for eternity. He calls Anakin the One. He proves it. Anakin does something in this arc that no one else could do. He simultaneously controls both the son and the daughter, stops them mid-conflict through force ability alone. The father watches and nods. He's been waiting for this specific person. Anakin says no, obviously. He's got a wife, a war, a Padawan. He's not becoming a cosmic monk on a dimension plane outside the galaxy. And honestly, you can't even blame him. But the refusal is exactly the kind of choice that haunts the rest of his life. The son is aligned with the dark side. He's angry, petulant, hungry for power. He wants the father gone, so there's nothing keeping the dark side in check. He sees Anakin, figures out what he is and decides to make his move. He shows Anakin the future. Vader, the Emperor, the Jedi Purge, Order 66 playing out across the galaxy. The temple burning, Ahsoka in danger, Padme dying, every horror that Anakin is going to cause, compressed into a single vision that he experiences all at once. And the son's pitch is essentially, you already know this is coming. Join me now, and maybe we can change it. Or at least, you can have enough power that it won't matter. That's the temptation. Anakin actually wavers. He sides with the son temporarily. Because of course he does. That's who Anakin is. He will break any rule, cross any line, if he thinks it saves someone he loves. Meanwhile, the son goes after Ahsoka. He corrupts her, pulls her into the dark side, uses her as a weapon against Anakin and Obi-Wan. And she's good at it, by the way. Dark side Ahsoka is not someone you want to fight. The thing that snaps her out of it is the daughter sacrificing herself. The daughter literally steps in front of the dagger of Mortis, a weapon designed to kill Force wielders, and takes the blow that was meant for the father. She dies from it. But before she's completely gone, the father uses her remaining life essence and pours it into Ahsoka, who had been killed by the son during the chaos. Ahsoka is brought back to life by the dying essence of the light side embodiment of the Force. She carries a piece of the daughter from this point forward, which is why the Convor Morai follows her for the rest of her life. That little owl-like bird that keeps showing up in Rebels, in the Clone Wars Season 7, in The Mandalorian, that's the daughter's presence, watching over the person who carries her essence, back to Anakin. The father steps in, erases his memory. He can't let Anakin leave Mortis, knowing the future. The knowledge is too dangerous, too destabilizing. He wipes it clean, all of it gone. The son, now without his manipulation working, fights Anakin directly. The father impales himself to remove his power from the sun, leaving the son vulnerable, and Anakin kills him. With the son dead, the daughter already gone, and the father dying, all three Force wielders are destroyed. Mortis collapses, the three Jedi are transplanted back into normal space at the exact moment they left it. No time has passed in the galaxy. Rex is waiting at the rendezvous point, confused about why they're all a bit pale and weird, and they never talk about it again. Not once in the show does anyone debrief on Mortis. Obi-Wan doesn't mention it. Ahsoka doesn't remember dying. Anakin doesn't remember the visions. The war just continues. The thing that makes Mortis so unsettling when you look back at it, the father wiped Anakin's memory. He did it to protect the galaxy, or at least that's the charitable reading. But what if he just delayed the inevitable? What if Anakin, had he kept those memories, would have made different choices? What if he could have walked away from Palpatine knowing exactly what that path leads to? Or, and this is the other reading, what if it wouldn't have changed anything? What if Anakin sees his future and still makes the same choices, because the fear of loss is so deep in him that no amount of foreknowledge can override it? The arc doesn't answer that. It leaves you sitting with it. What Mortis is really doing, if you step back and look at it structurally, is mapping the entire Star Wars saga onto this one family. The father, balance, the Force itself, sacrifices himself so that the dark can be destroyed. The daughter, the light, dies for someone she loves, passing her essence forward. The son, the dark, is angry and hungry and doesn't survive. If you squint, that's Anakin in Return of the Jedi, the father killing himself to allow the son to be struck down. The sacrifice that restores balance. Mortis is a rehearsal for everything that comes in the original trilogy, told 3 years before Revenge of the Sith even happens in universe. We're in 20 to 19 BBY. The Clone Wars have been grinding for roughly 2 to 3 years at this point, and somewhere in all of that, a man who was cut in half 10 years ago has decided that surviving wasn't enough. He wants to matter again. He wants to be unkillable in a completely different way, through owning so many pieces of the galaxy's criminal and political machinery that killing him becomes logistically inconvenient. That man is Darth Maul, and the arc we're talking about now is the story of how he built an empire from scratch, with nothing except a restored mind, a rebuilt body, a little brother, and a talent for reading exactly what people want to hear. The thing about Maul at this stage of the war, when Savage Opress brings him back from Lotho Minor, Maul isn't Darth Maul, the feared Sith assassin anymore. He's a broken, raving, half-mechanical wretch who's been sitting in a junk pile for a decade. Mother Talzin restores him, gives him functional legs, restores his shattered mind, and what comes back is a man who is angrier than before, but also, crucially, smarter than before. The decade of rage and isolation marinated it, refined it. He comes back from Dathomir with something he never had as Sidious's attack dog: patience. His first attempt at rebuilding, going after Hondo Ohnaka's pirate gang on Florum, goes sideways completely. Hondo plays him like a fiddle, turns his own men against him, and Maul and Savage barely escape with their lives when Obi-Wan shows to complicate things further. Which, again, if you've been following this video, is extremely on brand for Obi-Wan Kenobi. The man cannot not show. Fleeing from that disaster, adrift and beaten, the brothers are found by Death Watch, specifically by Pre Vizsla and his Mandalorian warriors, who have been hiding in the mountains and waiting for their moment since Satine's government outmaneuvered them. You've already met Death Watch. You know what they are: Mandalorian extremists who think their people's pacifist government is a cultural suicide note, backed in the shadows by Count Dooku, burning with resentment. Pre Vizsla is their leader. Vizsla looks at Maul and sees a useful tool. Maul looks at Vizsla and sees a stepping stone. Both of them think they're using the other. One of them is right. The deal they make is straightforward. Maul and Savage will help Death Watch build the muscle needed to take Mandalore. Death Watch will give Maul the resources and the foothold he needs to become a player again. And the way they're going to build that muscle is by doing something nobody has done before: unifying the galaxy's major criminal organizations under a single banner. The Clone Wars have created an enormous power vacuum in the Outer Rim. The Republic is stretched thin across 10,000 battlefronts. The Separatists are funding the war, but barely managing their own territories. And sitting in the gaps are the criminal underworld's major power blocks: Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, and the Hutt Grand Council. Each of them rich, each of them powerful, each of them watching the galaxy tear itself apart and wondering how to profit from it. Nobody has ever brought them together, because the whole point of criminal organizations is that they don't share. They compete, they undercut each other. They occasionally have each other assassinated at dinner. Maul's solution to this coordination problem: he and Savage kill the leadership of each organization and offer the second in command a very simple choice: join or follow your boss. Black Sun's ruling council gets massacred in their own conference room. The Pikes get a similar visit. The Hutts hold out a little longer, because the Hutts are nothing if not survivalists, but eventually fall in line when the math becomes clear. One by one, the Shadow Collective assembles. Through the oldest persuasion in the galaxy, the fear of what happens if you say no. By the time this coalition is assembled, Maul has a private army of criminals, cutthroats, bounty hunters, and syndicate soldiers that owes loyalty to no senate. He's created a third faction in the Clone Wars, one that nobody saw coming, and nobody in either the Republic or the Confederacy knows how to account for. And now he uses it on Mandalore, rather than a direct military assault, which would fail because Mandalorian warriors are exactly as dangerous as you think they are. And because an invasion would unite the population against the attacker, Maul stages a crime wave. Shadow Collective operatives hit Sundari, the capital city. Attacks on civilians, raids on infrastructure, chaos in the streets. The new Mandalorians, Satine's people, are pacifists. They have no army, no defense force worth speaking of. They are completely helpless. Then Death Watch arrives. The Mandalorian warriors, in their armor, drop in like saviors. They crush the criminals. They protect the people. They stand in the rubble and say, "This is what Mandalorians look like when they have their warrior spirit back." Within hours, the population is cheering for them. Satine's government evaporates. She's arrested before she can mount any meaningful resistance. The Senate she'd built, the neutrality she'd maintained through sheer diplomatic willpower, 3 years of careful work, keeping her world out of a war that wanted to swallow it, all of it gone in an afternoon. Pre Vizsla is proclaimed leader of Mandalore. He stands in the throne room with the Darksaber and the cheering crowd, and everything he's wanted for years. And then he betrays Maul. You saw that coming. The thing is, Vizsla saw it coming too. He knew the moment Maul wasn't useful anymore, he'd become a liability. So he has both brothers arrested and thrown in prison. Smart, pragmatic, exactly what Maul would have done in his position, except Maul also saw it coming, and he planned for it. From prison, Maul makes contact with the one person in Mandalore's political system who hates Vizsla as much as he does, former Prime Minister Almec, locked up by Satine years ago for corruption. Almec has connections, inside knowledge of the palace, and absolutely nothing to lose. Maul offers him the thing Vizsla never would, a path back to relevance. Almec helps them escape. Maul walks back into the throne room and challenges Pre-Vizsla to single combat for leadership of Death Watch and Mandalore. And the thing about Mandalorian culture, you can't say no to that. By law, by tradition, by the code that Death Watch has been waving like a banner for years, leadership belongs to the strongest. Vizsla has been screaming about Mandalorian warrior tradition since his first appearance. He cannot, in front of his own people, refuse a challenge and remain credible. So he accepts. Pre-Vizsla with the Darksaber, fighting with everything he has, giving Maul more trouble than almost anyone else in the series. He's a trained Mandalorian warrior with a legendary weapon and years of combat experience. And Maul beats him anyway. Mind you, very fair, Maul didn't use the Force at all, though he could. He takes the Darksaber. He takes Mandalore. He installs Almec as the puppet Prime Minister, the public face of a government that actually answers to Maul. The Shadow Collective is now a functioning state with a planet, an army, criminal enterprises across the Outer Rim, and a Sith Lord running it from the shadows. And Satine herself, the woman who held Mandalore's neutrality together through 3 years of a war that wanted to swallow everything, is sitting in a prison cell in her own capital city. And Maul lets her send a message. Maul allows Satine to escape briefly, allows her to reach a transmitter, allows her distress signal to hit the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Her nephew Corky helps her get out of the cell. Bo-Katan's faction of renegade Death Watch soldiers are running interference in the streets. There's a whole chase sequence through Sundari, jetpacks and speeders and blaster fire in the dark. And at the end of it, Satine gets her message out. Maul planned every single beat of that. The Jedi Council receives the message. Yoda and Ki-Adi-Mundi sit with Obi-Wan in the war room, and they tell him the same thing they always tell him. The Senate has to approve intervention in a neutral system. The Republic can't move without political authorization, and getting that authorization for a world that has been deliberately, officially, proudly neutral for years is going to take time. Nobody has. The Council's hands are tied, institutionally, procedurally, completely tied. Which means if Obi-Wan goes to Mandalore, he goes alone. Which is exactly what Maul is counting on. The thing about Obi-Wan Kenobi is that he is not actually the perfectly controlled, emotionally detached Jedi Master he presents to the world. He's someone who has chosen the Order over and over again, at real personal cost, and gotten very, very good at making that choice look effortless. But Satine is the one case in his entire life where the choice wasn't abstract. She's the one person he would have left everything for, if she'd ever asked. The code doesn't erase what you feel, it just tells you what to do with it. So when the Council says they can't move, Obi-Wan takes Anakin's ship, the Twilight, which has seen better days, disguises himself in confiscated Mandalorian armor, and walks into the city alone. He finds Satine in her cell, he gets her out. They make it back to the Twilight, and for about 40 seconds it looks like this might actually work. And then the ship gets hit by missiles, crashes back into the docking bay burning, and Maul's commandos are right there waiting. Because of course they are. Obi-Wan and Satine are taken to the throne room, and this is where the episode stops being an action sequence. Maul doesn't kill Obi-Wan. He made that decision a long time ago. Killing Kenobi is too clean, too fast, too merciful. What he wants is to make him feel it, to take something from him that he can never get back, to make Obi-Wan Kenobi understand, on a level that no lightsaber duel can reach, what it felt like to be cut in half and left for dead on Naboo, while everyone moved on with their lives. He force chokes Satine in front of him. He tells Obi-Wan to give in to his anger, to let the grief turn into something dark, to cross the line that Kenobi has kept himself behind his entire career. He draws the darksaber. He pulls Satine forward. He impales her with it. Looking at Obi-Wan the entire time, he watches Kenobi's face while he does it. Obi-Wan catches her as she falls. And her last words, the ones she's been carrying for decades, the ones she never said because saying them would have cost him the life he'd chosen. I've loved you always. I always will. They throw Kenobi in a cell below the palace, and it's Bo-Katan, Satine's sister, the woman who spent years on the opposite side of every political argument Satine ever had, who chose the warrior's path while Satine chose the diplomat's, who comes to get him out. She hands him a jetpack. She tells him to tell the Republic what's happening on Mandalore. She doesn't say much else. The grief between them is enormous and they don't have time for it. Then Darth Sidious arrives, the most powerful Sith in 1,000 years, the man who has been quietly maneuvering the entire Clone Wars from behind a desk on Coruscant, boards a ship personally and travels to Mandalore. That alone should tell you how seriously he's taking this. He tells Maul flat out, "You've gone beyond your station. You've built something real, and that is the problem." He came to remind him that there is only one master, and it isn't Maul. Savage, loyal, and fierce to the end, fights Sidious alone. Savage Opress, who, at this point is one of the physically most powerful people in the galaxy, fights Darth Sidious. And Sidious takes them both apart like he's dealing with mildly inconvenient traffic. He kills Savage with almost casual brutality, fighting with two lightsabers simultaneously. Savage dies on the floor of the Mandalorian throne room. Maul, beaten, humiliated, barely breathing, is kept alive. Sidious explicitly tells him why. He has plans for his former apprentice. He sees uses still. And that somehow is more terrifying than being killed. 19 BBY. A bomb goes off in the Jedi Temple hangar on Coruscant. 6 Jedi Knights dead, clone troopers dead, maintenance workers dead. An act of terrorism in the most protected building on the capital planet of the Republic. And the investigation almost immediately lands on Ahsoka Tano. Now, before we get into how this happens, let's talk about who actually did it. The bomber is Barriss Offee, Ahsoka's friend, someone she fought alongside, trusted, nearly died with on Geonosis when they were both still Padawans. Barriss Offee, who spent the war not at the front lines but in the Temple Medical Clinic, watching broken Jedi come back from battles that never should have happened, watching an order of peacekeepers transform, fight by fight, into the command structure of a war machine. The thing about Barriss, she's not wrong about the diagnosis. She's catastrophically wrong about the solution. But the diagnosis itself? The Jedi are leading armies. The Jedi Temple has become a military headquarters. The Republic they're defending is increasingly authoritarian. The Senate voted Palpatine emergency powers without a debate, and nobody ever asked for them back. Barriss saw all of this and couldn't live with the contradiction between what the Jedi are supposed to be and what they've become. So she blew up the hangar. She framed her closest friend to cover it, and she went to the funeral of the Jedi who died in the bombing and stood there, grieving publicly, while Ahsoka sat next to her and asked if she was okay. That's how this arc begins. The framing is methodical and clever. Barriss used a civilian intermediary, a woman named Letta Termund, whose husband worked in the temple, feeding him nanodroids that turned him into a living bomb. When Letta gets arrested, she asks specifically for Ahsoka, telling her she has information about a Jedi who was behind the attack. And then, right as she's about to name Barriss, she gets force choked. The security cameras catch the whole thing. The footage shows Ahsoka standing outside the cell. There's no audio. It looks exactly like what Barriss needed it to look like. From that point forward, everything the Republic does to Ahsoka is technically legal. Tarkin shows up demanding that she be handed to military jurisdiction, stripped of her Jedi status and tried for treason and murder. The Jedi Council complies. They expel her from the Order before the trial even begins. They take her braid, they take her rank, they take the identity she's had since she was a small child on Shili, brought to the temple and raised inside it, and then they hand her to the Republic military to face a tribunal where the penalty is death. Anakin Skywalker is the only person who refuses to accept the verdict. The rest of the council, Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, all of them, they issue a statement of regret and move on. Not Anakin. He investigates alone, follows the thread back to Ventress, who had been framed in the second layer of Barriss's plan, and Ventress, for reasons entirely her own, tells him the truth. She says whoever attacked her stole her lightsabers, which means whoever used them to frame Ahsoka kept them after the fact. Anakin goes straight to Barriss, takes her lightsaber, swings it at her, and watches her summon Ventress's red sabers to defend herself. She reveals herself by accident because she's too far gone to think clearly. They duel on the roof of the temple. Anakin wins. He hauls her into the courtroom. Barriss confesses. She admits everything. And then she tells the court that the Jedi have forgotten what they were. They are not peacekeepers. They are warriors. The temple is a barracks. The Order trains children to fight a republic that has already started becoming an empire. Every Jedi general leading clones into battle is part of the machine that's going to consume the galaxy. The courtroom goes quiet. Some part of everyone in that room knows she's not entirely wrong, and they have no answer for it. Ahsoka would later say, years after Order 66, that if the Jedi had really listened to Barriss, they might have been able to stop Palpatine before he completed his plan. Ahsoka is cleared. The council assembles, offers her rank back, offers a promotion, calls it her great trial, the trial that makes a true Jedi. And Ahsoka, standing on the steps of the temple in the sunlight, looks at Anakin and walks away. She doesn't say much. She tells him she knows he would have stayed, that leaving is something he struggles with too, and that she has to figure this out on her own. He watches her disappear down the stairs, the system that raised her from childhood, that was supposed to protect her, that expelled her the moment it became inconvenient. She doesn't want anything to do with its gratitude. Gratitude doesn't unexpel you. It doesn't give back the months of being hunted through Coruscant's underworld with shoot-on-sight orders and no one coming to help except a former Sith apprentice who recognized something familiar in the situation. She has nowhere to go, but she goes anyway. Now, while that wound is still fresh in the timeline, barely months later, the second story begins. Battle of Ringovinda, a space station built in a ring around a planet, one of the more unusual combat environments in the war. The 501st Legion is fighting to retake it from separatist forces under Admiral Trench. In battle in the middle of a corridor, while Jedi General Tipler is leading an advance, a clone trooper named Tup turns around, raises his blaster and shoots her in the head. He does it, and then snaps back to himself with no memory of the action. Fives sees it happen, and Fives refuses, absolutely refuses, to accept the Kaminoan explanation of a virus, a malfunction, an isolated incident. What follows is one of the most important investigations in Star Wars. Fives stays on Kamino with Tup when Rex returns to the front. He watches the Kaminoans treat Tup like a contaminated unit to be terminated and studied, not a person to be helped. He teams up with a medical droid named Azzy-3, who, in what is honestly one of the sweetest running threads in Clone Wars Season 6, agrees to help him because his core programming tells him a patient's life takes priority over all standing orders. They run unauthorized scans on Tup. They find a tumor in his brain. They remove it, and what comes out is not a tumor, it's an organic chip, implanted at the embryonic stage of cloning, grown into the brain before the brain was fully formed. And when they check the embryo hatcheries, every single clone in the Grand Army of the Republic has one. His last words are that the mission is finally over, that the nightmares are done. He doesn't even know what he's been carrying. He just knows that whatever was in his head is gone, and he can rest. Fives has his own chip removed. The clarity is apparently immediate. He understands, in a way the drugs hadn't let him understand before, exactly what the war is. He's sent to Coruscant with Shark T and the extracted chips to present everything to Chancellor Palpatine. This is the moment. This is as close as the galaxy ever gets. Palpatine knows exactly what those chips are. He's the one who had them designed. He sees Fives before the meeting, alone, without Shark T in the room. He tells him he knows. He tells Fives the truth about what the chips do. Not that they're inhibitors, not that they're behavioral corrections, but what they actually are. And then he frames him. He drugs him. Nala Se had already injected him with something on the transport, a drug that inflames paranoia and aggression, and arranges things so that when Fives comes out of that meeting, he looks like a man who just tried to assassinate the Chancellor. The guards rush in. Fives is disarmed. The story Palpatine tells afterward is that he's an unstable clone who tried to kill him. Everything Fives found is reclassified. The chips get explained away as a parasite native to Ringovinda. A vaccine is developed. Problem solved. Move along. Fives runs. He's hunted through Coruscant, a fugitive, on his own planet, a clone trooper, a man whose entire life has been defined by service and loyalty, now wanted for treason. He reaches out to Kix, gets word to Rex and Anakin, arranges a meeting in an abandoned warehouse. And this is the scene. This is the one people talk about. He's barely coherent. The drug is still in his system. His hands are shaking. He has the information. He knows what the chips do. He knows what Order 66 is. He knows Palpatine is involved. And he cannot make Anakin and Rex believe him. The idea that the Chancellor, his mentor, his confidant, the person who's been guiding him since he was 9 years old, is behind a conspiracy to murder every Jedi in the galaxy. That's destabilizing at a level that Anakin can't afford to engage with, while also being a general in an active war. Commander Fox arrives with shock troopers. Fives grabs one of Rex's pistols. Fox shoots him. He dies in Rex's arms. His last words, the mission, the nightmares, finally over. Same as Tup, he goes out echoing his brother, who went out alone on a medical table on Kamino, and neither of them ever knew how right they were about everything. Rex files a grievance report, a confidential one. He states, plainly and for the record, that he believes Fives may have been correct about the chips having a hidden purpose beyond behavioral inhibition. He knows it'll be buried. He files it anyway because it's the only thing he can do for a brother he watched die telling the truth. 3 years later, that report is what saves Ahsoka Tano's life. She finds it in the ship's archives during Order 66, uses it to locate Rex's chip, cuts it out with a surgical application of the Force in the middle of a firefight, and gets Rex back. Fives never knew her well. He wasn't there for the Siege of Mandalore. But the thing he did, the report, the evidence, the refusal to let it go, crosses 3 years and lands exactly where it needs to. He was right about everything. He died knowing it. He died alone. And somehow, through the weird geometry of the Force and loyalty and documentation, it mattered anyway. Now, while Fives' story is playing out, and while Ahsoka is somewhere on Coruscant trying to figure out who she is without the Order, Yoda is doing something that nobody else on the Jedi Council knows about. He hears a voice. It's Qui-Gon Jinn, dead for 13 years, killed by Darth Maul on Naboo when Anakin was 9 years old. The Jedi don't believe consciousness survives death. That's a fundamental part of their understanding of the Force. When you die, you become one with it. You cease to be an individual. The idea that someone specific could be speaking to him from beyond death, it contradicts everything Yoda has believed for 8 centuries. The Council is worried. They think he might be losing his mind, or worse, being manipulated by the dark side. But the voice is real. Yoda knows the difference. And when Qui-Gon sends him to Dagobah, a swampy, unremarkable planet in the Outer Rim that happens to sit on a powerful Force nexus, Yoda goes. In a cave on Dagobah, the cave that Luke Skywalker will enter decades later and see his own face inside Vader's helmet, Yoda confronts visions of what's coming. Darth Sidious, the Republic falling, Jedi dying. The shape of the catastrophe is there, in the darkness, and he can see it, but not clearly enough to stop it. From Dagobah the Force, specifically a group of beings called the 5 Priestesses, ancient Force wielders, who exist as the keepers of a specific and almost incomprehensible secret, sends Yoda to the wellspring of life, a place deep in the heart of the galaxy, inside a nebula, generating so much Force energy that instruments malfunction trying to measure it. The birthplace of the midi-chlorians, the origin point of Force sensitivity in the physical universe. He has to leave his lightsaber with R2-D2. He goes in without it. The trials he faces are confrontations with himself. The priestesses, who represent serenity, sadness, anger, confusion and joy, push him through visions designed to find where his ego lives. He faces a dark reflection of himself, a shadow Yoda made of everything he's suppressed in 800 years of Jedi discipline. And the trial isn't to defeat it. The trial is to acknowledge it. The Jedi philosophy says you conquer the dark side through denial, through discipline, through the suppression of passion. And the wellspring shows Yoda that he's wrong. His shadow grows stronger the more he rejects it. Only when he says, plainly, that yes, this darkness is part of him, but I will not surrender to it. Only then does it lose power. Humility, not mastery. Acceptance, not suppression. He also gets shown a vision of a galaxy where the war never happened. Qui-Gon alive, Dooku never fallen, Ahsoka still in the Order, everyone he loves, whole. He has to reject that too, because it's not real, and choosing the comfortable lie over the painful truth is exactly the kind of self-deception that leads to everything the Jedi are currently failing to prevent. From there, Moraband, the ancient Sith homeworld. A dead planet, red and grey, tombs everywhere, something in the air that feels like malice. Yoda has to walk through it alone. Sidious and Dooku try to trap him in an elaborate shared vision, a spiritual attack designed to get Yoda to sacrifice Anakin, symbolically, to destroy the Chosen One before he can fulfill his destiny. The vision is intricate and convincing. Yoda sees through it, disrupts it, walks out of Moraband. He returns to Coruscant. He tells the Council that there may be a path forward, that the war may end in catastrophe, but something can survive it. He doesn't explain in detail. They wouldn't believe him yet, but he begins the work that Qui-Gon started, understanding how consciousness persists beyond death, how a Jedi can become a voice in the Force rather than a silence, how knowledge can be passed forward even when everything physical is destroyed. Qui-Gon found this secret but died before he could fully develop it. He passed what he knew to Yoda. Yoda will pass it to Obi-Wan during the years of exile. Obi-Wan will pass it to Luke through a death that the Empire thinks is a defeat. Luke will pass it to Rey through a disappearance that looks like failure. This chain, one dead Jedi whispering to the next, runs from the last year of the Clone Wars all the way through Return of the Jedi. We left Maul on the floor of the Mandalorian throne room, beaten humiliated, Savage dead beside him, Sidious standing over him, saying he had plans. Some of you have been sitting with that unresolved thread for a while. Well, Sidious took Maul prisoner and handed him off to Count Dooku, who tortured him for information about the Shadow Collective, which criminal organizations were involved, how they were structured, how much of a threat Maul actually represented to the Sith's control of the war. This is covered in the canon comic series Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, 4 issues that adapted what was originally going to be a Clone Wars Season 6 arc before the show was cancelled. It's canon, it counts, and it fills in a gap the show never got to close: Maul's Mandalorian loyalists. Specifically, Rook Cast and Gar Saxon, 2 commanders who stayed devoted to him even after Sidious's visit, broke him out of prison on Stygian Prime. The escape was planned from the beginning, because the thing Sidious actually wanted wasn't Maul, it was Mother Talzin, the Night Sister who'd been pulling threads from the spirit realm since Dathomir burned, who had enough power in the Force to actually threaten his plans if left unchecked. And the only reliable way to draw her out was to use her son as bait. So Maul runs, tries to rebuild the Shadow Collective, captures Dooku and Grievous as a power play, tries to use them to force Talzin into the open on Dathomir, where he can protect her. Sidious arrives personally, again. The battle on Dathomir ends with Talzin sacrificing herself physically to send Maul to safety. She dies holding off Sidious and Grievous with her own body, protecting the son Sidious stole from her decades ago. Maul escapes stripped of most of his criminal empire, the Black Sun and Pike Syndicate, having already bailed when it became clear the Shadow Collective was losing. He still has the Darksaber, he still has Mandalorian loyalists, and he retreats to Mandalore itself, battered, diminished, carrying a grief and a fury that has nowhere left to go. That's where we find him in Season 7. A man with a planet, a blade and a vision of a future that terrifies him, waiting for the moment he's been dreading to arrive. Still 19 BBY, the last weeks of the war, and nobody alive knows that yet, except one man in a Senate office on Coruscant who has known how this ends since before it began. Ahsoka Tano walked out of the Jedi Temple after her exoneration and didn't look back. She's been living as a civilian on Coruscant's lower levels, helping refugees, staying off the radar, existing in the space between a war she was part of and a galaxy that doesn't quite know what to do with a former Jedi Padawan who chose to leave. And then Bo-Katan Kryze finds her. Mandalore is still under Maul's control, or rather, under the control of his puppet government, with Almec as Prime Minister and Maul running things from the shadows. Bo-Katan has been building her resistance since the Night Satine died, gathering the Night Owls, recruiting Mandalorian warriors who refuse to serve a non-Mandalorian pretender. She needs Republic firepower for the assault she's been planning. She knows she can't walk into the Jedi Council and get it. But Ahsoka Tano has relationships the Council doesn't fully own anymore. She's not part of the system, which means she can move through it differently. So, Ahsoka goes to the Republic, not to the Council. She negotiates directly with Anakin and Obi-Wan, and what follows is one of the most layered reunion scenes in the entire series. Anakin is happy to see her. Obi-Wan is warm, cautious, already calculating. And Ahsoka, she's different. You can see it in how she carries herself. She left as a teenager who'd been abandoned by her institution. She's come back as something that the institution doesn't have a category for. The 501st Legion is there. The clones of the 332nd Company had repainted their helmets to match Ahsoka's facial markings, showing their loyalty and appreciation towards her return. Anakin opens the hangar doors, and there they are. Hundreds of soldiers standing at attention, every helmet carrying her colours. She didn't ask for it, nobody ordered it. The clones did it because loyalty means everything to them, and she'd earned theirs years ago, battle by battle. She almost can't hold it together in that moment, and honestly neither can you. Then the alarms start. Grievous has attacked Coruscant. Anakin and Obi-Wan are pulled away immediately. Grievous has kidnapped Palpatine, and every Jedi in range is being redirected to the capital. The reunion that was supposed to anchor this arc gets cut off before it can breathe. Obi-Wan's parting advice to Ahsoka, delivered on his way out the door. He killed Maul once. Best to capture him. He doesn't seem to stay dead. Anakin splits the 501st, promotes Rex to commander, and designates Ahsoka as an advisor. The technical workaround for the fact that she's no longer part of the Republic military. He gives her new lightsabers, and then he and Obi-Wan leave for Coruscant. The assault on Sundari begins. Rex and part of the 500 First Force Maul's loyalists under Gar Saxon into retreat. Bo-Katan and the Night Owls are fighting alongside the clones through the streets of the capital, Mandalorian warriors and Republic soldiers operating as a single force against Maul's Shadow Collective holdouts. Bo-Katan apprehends Prime Minister Almec, the puppet who's been running the public face of Maul's government, and they get one critical piece of information out of him before Gar Saxon assassinates him on Maul's orders. Maul had been hoping to lure Anakin to Mandalore specifically. That unanswered question sits in the middle of everything that follows. Ahsoka trails Maul through the tunnels beneath Sundari and ends up exactly where he wants her, the throne room of the royal palace. Maul waiting for her like he's been there for hours. He uses the Force to yank blasters out of the hands of every clone in the room before anyone can fire. He tells Ahsoka he's seen a vision of the future, the fall of the Republic, the destruction of the Jedi, the galaxy consumed by the Sith. He tells her that Darth Sidious has been engineering everything from the beginning, that the Clone Wars are not a conflict between two sides, but a controlled demolition built by one man. He tells her they've both been tools, both been used, both been discarded when convenient, her by the Jedi Council, him by Sidious. He tells her that together, maybe they could stop it. He extends his hand, and Ahsoka, who has every reason to distrust him, who knows exactly what Maul is and what he's done, actually pauses, because everything he's saying lines up with what she already knows. The Council abandoned her. Barriss Offee wasn't entirely wrong. The war has been chewing people up and calling it justice for 3 years. She doesn't trust Maul, but she's listening. She agrees to hear him out on one condition. He has to answer one question. Why does he want Anakin Skywalker on Mandalore? Maul tells her that Anakin is the key, that he has long been groomed for his role as Sidious's apprentice, that he had hoped to lure him here, to kill him and deny the Sith Lord his prize. He'd seen it in his visions. The Chosen One's destiny isn't to destroy the Sith, it's to become one of them. And Ahsoka's faith in Anakin doesn't crack. It doesn't even bend. She calls him a liar, ignites her lightsabers, and the conversation is over. What happens next is one of the finest sequences in the history of Star Wars animation. The duel between Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul, through the throne room, out onto the upper rafters of Sundari, across the skeletal beams high above the city, is technically in a completely different class from anything the show had done before. Ray Park, who originally played Maul in The Phantom Menace, reprised the role via motion capture for the fight, while Lauren Mary Kim provided Ahsoka's choreography. This was the first and only time motion capture was successfully used in the series. They are evenly matched for most of the fight, and that in itself is remarkable. She wins. Maul is terrified of what comes next, of what he knows is already in motion. He tells her it's too late. She doesn't believe him. She relays to Obi-Wan what Maul said, the name Darth Sidious, the claim that a Sith Lord has been running both sides of the war from the beginning. Obi-Wan tells her what the Council already suspects, that Darth Sidious is real, that he orchestrated the Clone Wars, and that he's been manipulating events from the start. Count Dooku was recently killed by Anakin. Their only other source for information about Sidious is gone. Maul is now, potentially, the most important prisoner in the galaxy. They load him in restraints and head back to hyperspace. Maul is caged. The Battle of Mandalore is won. Bo-Katan is named regent of her people. It feels, in the strange way that the last minutes before catastrophe sometimes feel like something good just happened. Ahsoka is standing on a Republic Venator-class Star Destroyer called the Tribunal, watching Mandalore disappear behind them when she feels something shift in the Force. It's enormous, it's irreversible, and it moves through her like a physical impact. Somewhere across the stars, Anakin Skywalker has knelt before Darth Sidious for the first time and called him Master. At almost the same moment, Maul, still locked in his ray shield containment unit in the hold of the Tribunal, senses it too. The vision he had has just become the present. He starts screaming, because Maul, for all the terrible things he is, understood something that nobody else in this story fully grasped until it was already over. Sidious winning is not good for anyone. including the people who think they're on his side. The clones around Ahsoka receive the order simultaneously. The men she has fought beside for years. The soldiers who painted their helmets in her colours as an act of devotion, turning to look at her with the same blank purpose. Ahsoka locked in a medical bay. Clones cutting through the door. Maul trapped in his containment unit simultaneously. The ship suddenly full of enemies where there used to be family. She makes a calculation. She can't fight her way out through 400 soldiers alone. She needs a distraction big enough to move the whole ship. So she goes to Maul's containment unit and opens it. She is not freeing him as an ally. She is releasing a predator into a corridor full of people who are trying to kill her and hoping the math works in her favour. Maul, for his part, obliges magnificently. He tears through the Tribunal's clones with his bare hands and the Force and absolutely no lightsaber. These are Jesse and Kix, and men with painted helmets and histories and the names of their brothers tattooed on their arms. While Maul creates chaos, Ahsoka tracks down 3 astromech droids, R7, CH3, 3P, and one called Gigi, and has them pull Rex's old report from the ship's archives. The one he filed after Fives died, the one he filed because he didn't know what else to do for a dead brother. She finds what she needs, the inhibitor chip, sitting in every clone's brain, organic and invisible, and waiting. She finds Rex. She knocks him out before the chip can stop him from letting her. And then, in the middle of a firefight, on a ship that has started actively dying around her, she locates the chip in his skull with the Force and cuts it out with surgical precision using nothing but her lightsaber. Rex comes back. They have to survive this ship. Together, without killing anyone if they can help it. Maul, meanwhile, has found the hangar and found a shuttle. He uses the Force to tear out the Tribunal's hyperspace drives, killing the clones working on them, dropping the ship violently out of hyperspace, sending it into the gravity well of a nearby moon it was never meant to visit. The ship is now falling. Jesse, Commander Jesse, the most decorated, most by-the-book soldier in the 332nd, the man who repainted his helmet with Ahsoka's markings as an act of devotion not 6 days ago, has been leading the hunt this whole time. His chip is active and complete, and he is every inch the soldier the Kaminoans designed him to be. He has Rex demoted. He orders his men to kill them both. Rex tries to appeal to him, tries to reach the person underneath, and Jesse doesn't crack because Jesse's chip doesn't leave room for the person underneath. Ahsoka uses the Force to drop a section of the hangar floor, scattering the clones below into the bay. Rex throws her lightsabers back. They run. The ship is now coming apart. She makes it to a Y-wing, one of the old bombers, barely operational, throws Rex onto it and tries to leap aboard as the bay falls away beneath her. She misses, catches the landing strut by her fingertips. Rex pulls her up. The Tribunal hits the moon's surface at full speed. There are 2 people standing in front of a field of wreckage, Ahsoka and Rex, the only survivors. They bury the clones, one by one, each grave marked with a helmet. The soldiers who painted themselves in her colours are all gone. Ahsoka stands in front of the graves, holding one of her lightsabers Anakin gave to her, the last physical thing that connects her to him. She lets it drop. The Clone Wars are over. The Republic dissolved. Dissolved from the inside by unanimous vote by a Senate that applauded the man who just handed them a dictatorship because they were too tired and too scared and too compromised to see what they were cheering for. Palpatine stands at the podium and declares the Galactic Empire, and the senators who spent 3 years funding a war they didn't start, voting for emergency powers they didn't question, approving army deployments they didn't understand, they clap. They clap because it's over, because someone finally did something decisive, because the war worked exactly the way it was designed to. The Jedi Order, gone in an afternoon, destroyed not by the army they commanded, the soldiers they trained alongside, whose names they learned, whose wounds they dressed, turned against them in a single synchronized moment by a chip that had been sitting in 3 million skulls since before the war began. The temple itself taken, masters killed in the field, on planets they were trying to protect. The survivors scattered across the galaxy in 1s and 2s, hunted by the machine they helped build. Count Dooku, a man who believed the Republic was corrupt and genuinely wanted to rebuild something better, who was right about the corruption and catastrophically wrong about the solution. Executed by Anakin Skywalker on Palpatine's orders over Coruscant. He went from Jedi Master to Sith Apprentice to disposable tool, without ever fully understanding which one he was. He thought he was the architect, he was the scaffolding. General Grievous, a warrior who was turned into a weapon, a man who was essentially killed and rebuilt as something designed to murder Jedi, who ended the war being shot in his exposed organs by Obi-Wan Kenobi in a corridor on Utapau. The Separatist Council, the actual political leaders of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, massacred by Darth Vader on Mustafar immediately after the war ended. Palpatine didn't need them anymore. He needed the war they represented, and when the war was over, so were they. The clones, phased out within years by an empire that found them expensive and inconvenient, replaced by cheaper human volunteers who were easier to control and didn't have complicated feelings about the Jedi they used to fight alongside. 3 million men grown specifically for this war, used for exactly this war, discarded after this war. Most of them never got to find out what the galaxy was like without it. Maul escaped into hyperspace on a stolen shuttle, the Shadow Collective in ruins, his mother dead, his brother dead, his empire gone. He ends up on a forgotten planet called Malachor, alone and slowly losing his mind again. He appears again years later in Star Wars Rebels, hollowed out by isolation, the darksaber still in his hand. His actual end comes on Tatooine, a single brief duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert, over in 3 moves, dying in the arms of the man he spent his entire life trying to destroy. His last words are about Luke Skywalker. He asks if the boy is the chosen one. Obi-Wan says yes, and Maul, of all people, says, "Then he will avenge us." Now, years later, on a moon with no name on any Republic chart. Snow has fallen over the crash site. The graves are almost invisible now. An Imperial shuttle descends. Stormtroopers fan out. Probe droids scan the wreckage, and a black-cloaked figure moves through the snow toward the site of the burial, moving with the deliberate weight of someone who has been hunting through the galaxy's wreckage for a long time. Darth Vader kneels in the snow, reaches through it, pulls out a lightsaber, cold, rusted slightly from the winter. He ignites it. He holds it for a moment and looks up, where a convor, a bird, pale and silent, connected in ways the story never fully explains, to the daughter of Mortis and to Ahsoka Tano, circles overhead. He watches it. Then he extinguishes the lightsaber, takes it with him, turns away, and as he walks, the camera settles on a cracked helmet lying in the snow, one of the 330-second Ahsoka's colours still visible through the ice, with his reflection fading from the visor as he disappears.